Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. I want to give everybody another about 1 minute to sign on. We had several last minute registrations, so I see that our attendee list is still growing here, which is great to see and great to have. So we'll get started in about let's give it another 40 seconds or so. Well, while the final attendees are signing on here, let me say a couple things. One, I'm really excited to be able to give you guys this technical series webinar. On this webinar, this is a time where I get to do a lot less talking, and we're going to have Giancarlo, our CTO, and Jacopo, one of our head of engineering, be giving the presentation. This is a very technical presentation about using public APIs and webhooks. Of course, we're going to be focusing on Domotz's public APIs and webhooks, but it's going to be a great informative discussion. And with that being said, before we get started, Giancarlo, let's go to the next slide here. Let's talk about a couple basic details of this. First of all, we do want this to be interactive. It is a webinar, so I know you guys are muted from a microphone, but please ask questions. Use the questions panel in the GoToWebinar control panel. And we have several members of our team that are standing by to answer those questions. And then at the end of this presentation, we'll consolidate the questions and we'll have Giancarlo and Jacopo answer those as appropriate. If your questions can't get answered on the webinar, by all means, you can reach out to support@domotz.com and our team will answer those as well. Next slide, Giancarlo. So in today's agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit very quickly about how and why APIs are useful to you as an integrator, as a service provider. And then Giancarlo and Jacopo are really going to go through what these APIs are, how to use webhooks, the benefits of them. We'll explore some of the usage of these APIs through tools like Postman. And then we're going to give some examples, right? Examples of how you can use our public APIs to do things like retrieving camera snapshots or grabbing reports of information. We're going to be providing real-time examples, and you'll be able to copy and edit this code or these snippets for your own use case. And of course, we'll do a couple live demos on that. We'll have a Q&A at the end, but I want to make special note here that all of the code and the technical presentation slides that we're giving, we are going to make those available after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, so if you wish to go back, you'll be able to go back and look at things as well. But we'll have the code snippets and the presentation examples made available with the webinar. With that being said, let's go to the next slide. Here's Giancarlo. And let's talk a little bit about how APIs are useful for you. First of all, APIs, application programming interfaces, are the tools that we use in order to build out our user interface. For you as a service provider, and being able to take advantage of the public APIs that we make available does a lot for you. You can generate customized reports. You can aggregate data within your environment or within your Domotz account in a way that makes sense to you. If our dashboard is not necessarily showing things the way you expect them to be seen, you can go off and create your own dashboards. You can create your own web pages. These are the power of what APIs do. It also allows you to aggregate information from our website and put it into, or our services, and put it into other applications as appropriate for you. When it comes to personalized dashboards, groups like Alvarez Technology, we have a case study on them, and then Giancarlo on the next slide, right, we have another group that, another service provider that takes advantage of these APIs to build out dashboards for them and really personalize it to their unique capabilities. These are just two examples of people that, or groups that use these types of APIs to do things unique to the market. I think once you go through this technical series and see what's available out there, I'm sure that you guys will come up with a lot of ideas as well. We even have examples of, let's call them vendors or third parties that are using the Domotz agent on their customer sites, but then they're providing their own dashboards and unique applications to those customers as well. With that being said, let's get started. I wanted to show a couple pictures. Giancarlo is our Chief Technical Officer. He's been on a lot of our live demos. I'm sure many of you know him. A lot of you may not know Jacopo though. Jacopo's been around for really since the beginning of Domotz, and he's our head of engineering, and he'll be giving a lot of examples there. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Giancarlo and he can take it away.
Thanks, JB, for the introduction. Very clear. So let's get started, and let's get started with the Domotz Public API, how to collect the API, how to read the documentation of API, how to start using the Domotz Public API. We will dive a little bit into one of the tools that can be used to explore the Domotz Public API. I choose Postman for a couple of reasons. I am very familiar with that tool, but also is very common among developers. So it will be very familiar to your team, your developers team, to get familiarized with the Domotz Public API. So I will go through this example by generating an API key in Domotz. I will also give you a reference on where the documentation of Domotz Public API is. And then I will create a collection of API into Postman. This will be automatically done by putting a URL into the Postman, and you will see how that will be automatically generated. And I will give you some example on how to use the public API. Okay, let's dive into that one, and then I will jump into the next topic. Just give me a second. So what we need to do first is creating, you might be familiar with the Domotz portal. The first thing that we need to do is definitely create a public API key. And this is done from the Domotz portal with the team master account. So the owner of the account can generate, under the setting, API key. They can generate a new API key. In the same page, there is a reference to the documentation. JB has shown this documentation every single time we do a webinar. This is automatically updated with the new API we put in place, and it provides also with some example in different languages, cool example, JavaScript, Node, and so on. So let's see how it works, the generation of an API key and where we use that one. Let me put my account, password. You will basically give a name, example for the webinar. We generate an API key. Once we get this API key, we let's make sure we copy this API key and we will reuse this API key in our example. Now, just for this example, for this the purpose of the webinar, I'm going to delete this API key since I showed to everybody. I want to make sure my account is secure enough. Let's jump now to the Postman, and I will show you how the Postman can be used to do example and usage of or familiarize with the Domotz Public API. Now, you see here I have already the collection, which I will use for showing some of the API, but let me show you how I can create that collection. As I was mentioning in the presentation, there is a link that you can use to import a new collection. That link is basically the endpoint provided by when you generate the API key plus meta / open API definition. By doing that, Postman will automatically import a new definition with all the API key. Now, since I have already a Domotz Public API there, I will import as an existing one, as a copy one, and it will import all the API with the definition of the API and the example that you can use there. Once you import the collection, next step is to make sure that you put an authorization key by the API key here, and then you specify what is the API key name, which is X API key, and your value of API key, just blah, 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 whatever. This is the API key that you copied when you created that one from the Domotz portal. Now let me remove this one, and I will show you a couple of examples of how to get information out of Domotz. So the first one is the retrieve information about the API usage. So for your account, how many API you have run in the last 24 hours. And this spreads by all the API key that I created. So I had an API key which is test Postman, and then I have Yahoo or IT Portal and all the other API key that I created with the usage and split by resources and split by IP of calling that API key. The next API I want to show you is under the agent to return all the agents listed in my account. And by running this API, I can either set a display name, which is a search for a specific agent, or just without anything, it will list all the agents with the display name is the agent, which are available under my account. You might notice that I have access to an agent which is shared to me by my colleague JP, or other agents where I am the owner of that specific agent. As I was mentioning, I can filter or search for a specific agent by specifying the display name like just this. The next API key I want to show you is where I want to dive into the details of an agent or all the devices that are available or have been discovered under a specific agent. You might notice here that we need the variable, which is the agent ID. You can get the agent ID either from the list of the agents I showed you before, or in the URL path from the web app, you will have the agent ID. So by doing that, you will basically retrieve all the list of devices available under my agent. The next one I want to show you is return specific details or more details about a specific device. In this case, I selected a device which is a security camera, which is part of the topic we will cover today with the demo, and basically get all the information about this security camera, the names, the location of the security camera, the vendor, and all the other information. You can get more like the history, when the security camera went online, when it went offline, and so on. The last one I want to show is how I take a snapshot out of that security camera. As you know, we leverage ONVIF protocol, and by doing that, we can basically take the snapshot out of that camera. And this is probably JP and our colleague Bobby looking at the webinar right now. And that's everything from Postman. The next thing I want to cover is the usage of webhooks. You might be familiar with the fact that the public API are used to collect in a sync way or periodically way information out of Domotz. But if you are planning to build your own platform or your own portal around Domotz data, you probably want to synchronize with Domotz data through the public API, but you don't want to pull very frequently the data out of Domotz. You want to subscribe to events from Domotz, and you want to make sure that your web server is capable of receiving events from Domotz and manage and treat those events to keep a real-time status of agents or device on your own portal. That's why you need to use the webhooks. So public API gives you access to the information, gives you access to control devices, gives you access to create tunnel and so on. But if you want to get the stream of events from Domotz, you need to use the webhooks. We do provide webhook documentation also for the webhooks, also available in the same reference I provided you before for the public API. Very quick overview of how to use the webhook. Basically, you start from the Domotz website, the Domotz web app. Go to the Domotz web app. You go to the shared alerts and ticketing system, and here it is where you can configure a webhook where you want to receive events from Domotz. So you can add the webhook, you specify the URL HTTPS, whatever, the URL where you want to receive your webhook, and a quick description, a reference for you in future to remember that that's the webhook you want to send events to. Once you create the contact channel, you associate that contact channel to a specific shared alert profile. So in this case, I have this request bean, which is a very powerful and free resource to test webhooks. You can associate that contact channel, specify the events that you want to subscribe through that shared alert, and then making sure that this shared alert is applied to the device that you want to monitor through Domotz and you want to send to your web server. And this is basically the events. I will show you all the events that has been collected until now, until last minute, 1 minute ago. These are the events that I'm receiving on this web server. And this is the type of events as they are received here. So in this case, there is a device that lost a heartbeat. There might be a device that went offline. Yeah, most of these are probably heartbeat loss. These are the most frequent ones. But you might receive here device going up, device going down, agents going offline, completely offline, or more. All the events that you can generate in Domotz can be subscribed through the min of the webhook. This really brings me to the end of this introduction. And now I want to give presentation to my colleague Jacopo. Just a second. He will start from here and he will go in detail in the other use case.
And Giancarlo, while you're doing that transition to Jacopo, I want to say, I want to remind everybody that if you have questions, by all means, leverage the question section. And Giancarlo, I really want to thank you for taking a picture of Bobby and I while we're in the office here. So that was very good.
I know you would appreciate that.
Yeah. Jacopo.
Hello.
Ready.
I'm ready. Let's go. Thank you, Giancarlo, for the introduction. Thank you, JB, for the photo. I was very young in that photo, actually. So I'm going to introduce the audience to some Python code that will show an interesting example of the Domotz API that Giancarlo already introduced, that is how to fetch camera snapshot from ONVIF cameras. And in the meantime, I will introduce some concept about the API and how the different entities and resource interact and are related one with each other. So the goal of this presentation is to show this use case, and we will introduce some REST resources that you already skimmed over in Giancarlo's part of presentation, but we may maybe go in deep detail for a few of them. And at the end, we will see how to write a program that stores and gets camera snapshot and stores them in your hard drive. So for doing your experiments with what we will see during this presentation, you need a Domotz API key. You know how to get them from Giancarlo's example. And of course, you will need to have an agent with at least one ONVIF camera that is online and unlocked. I won't go over how to unlock the device. Of course, JB have already shown how to do in previous webinars. And for understanding, you need some basic Python programming skills or programming skills in general, but not very deep knowledge of programming, just a little bit of knowledge for understanding, because the code will be really simple. And just for a technical note, I'm going to use the request Python library because it helps me write smaller and more concise code. Okay, in order to get the snapshot, we need to list all the agents. We already seen the resource used to list all the agents we have access to, and I'm going to where the documentation is, and for getting snapshot, we are interested in agents that are online. We cannot get snapshot from offline or uninstalled agents, of course, and we will also exclude agents that do not grant API access. And in the following code, I will omit any error handling or optimization in order to keep the code smaller and easily understandable. The code of all the example is available on GitHub, and that is the URL, and the URL will be shown again further in the presentation. So, to the point, this is a very small program that performs what the Postman example did in Giancarlo's presentation. And actually, it adds logic by filtering out all those agents that we are not interested in, that are the ones that are not online and which doesn't have the API enabled. So this is a small program that can be launched from the command line or from an IDE, and it needs two command line parameters, the endpoint and the API key that Giancarlo showed before. And it only one API call is done, the agent list is fetched, and you can see how the path agent is added to the endpoint and how the headers have how the API key is passed as an HTTP header. The response is parsed as JSON in order to have a usable dictionary that can be explored and analyzed in the following code. After we get the agent list from the API, we loop over it and we just print all the agents that match our criteria, that is, it's online and it's enabled, and we will show the display name and the ID that it will be used in the next example. So let me give you a live demo. I have hidden my endpoint and my API key so that I don't have to delete as Giancarlo did. So I have hidden using shell variables, and this is a Mac shell. So everyone that has a Mac or Linux will not have difficulties in replicating this code. It's a little bit more tricky in Windows, but I guess if you can program, or if you have access to a programmer, it will be easier in Windows too. So we are interested in the IoT Lab agent that is one of many JB's agents that he kindly made available for the presentation. So after we get all the agents and we choose the one we want to get the cameras from, we need to filter out all the devices, that can be hundreds of them, in order to choose only the cameras, all the devices that can get snapshot, actually, not just. So how do we know if a device can get a snapshot? In a programmatically way, of course. If a human can see that the device is a camera, he can decide to take a snapshot. But how can we tell the computer, a program, that a certain device can perform a certain operation? In Domotz, we have decided to expose a list of types, all the types that the system can recognize, and for each type we enumerate its capabilities. Capabilities are sets of actions that can be done upon all those devices. And we are interested in the snapshot capability. Right now, only ONVIF cameras have snapshot capability, but probably in the near future, we will add other type of cameras or device that can get image snapshot. And those new types will be usable with the same API I'm going to show you in the next in the next example. So I want to run this code because I just want to emphasize how it is pretty much the same code. If you skim over and just look at the structure of the program, it's very similar. But actually, the API we use is different, and also is different the criteria that we use for selecting the right entities. In this case, we are getting all the types that are acknowledged by Domotz, and we are filtering out, and you are just selecting those types that have snapshot as capabilities. There are other kinds of capabilities like reboot or restart, but we are, and that way you will be able to know if a certain device has or not the capability of doing an operation based on its type and the capabilities of that type. So once we are capable of filtering out and selecting only the cameras, we are going to show them in order to cross-check if our program is doing the right thing. So I will write the program and show the actual list of cameras gotten from the web API besides the list that my program shows in order to cross-check if my program is working properly. So I'm interested, of course, only in cameras in devices that have the snapshot capabilities, that are online, and for which the authentication is valid. That means either they don't need the password or the user have already inserted the right password. The API I'm going to use is documented on, of course, on the Domotz portal. And so the next step is a little bit more complex of the previous one because we are going to do more calls. Because first of all, we need a third parameter as a command line parameters, that is the agent ID we are going to inspect. Then we are going to fetch all devices, because right now the API doesn't allow to filter the device by type, but it's a 100 of or 200 of devices at most, so it won't be a problem fetching all of them. Then we are going to fetch all the types because it's not statically decided which types can get snapshots. So maybe tomorrow the list will change, and we are going to choose which types are cameras. The line that assigns to camera types is the same code we saw in the previous example, written in a more concise way. So I defined a print camera function because it will come handy in the next example. So we are going to loop on all devices, and I'm going to do something that is not very elegant, that is try and just ignoring every error, because we are only interested in devices that have a type, have a valid detected type, and whose status is online, and they have an authentication status. So if somehow the service, the API returns devices that don't match or don't have those fields, we just ignore and pass on. And this way, we are going to print all the camera devices that are recognized and that are online. So this is the expected result. Of course, the expected result will not be so nice, but I expect to find 6 devices with those names. It's not pretty, I say that, but we have all of the 6 devices, and besides we have also the ID. It's not really useful in this context, but in other contexts, when you have to write a program, the really important handler for identifying a device is its ID. So finally, we are going to take the snapshots. We are using the same API resource that Giancarlo showed, and that is quite different from the other because it doesn't return a JSON, but it does return a binary string containing the image itself. The format of the image is usually JPEG, but it's not actually sure because the cameras can return other formats. Some strange cameras return TIFF formats or GIF images, so we cannot just assume that the format is JPEG. And the API will tell us which image format it is in the content type HTTP header. So we are going to use some code that is very similar to the previous example. So that, but instead of writing the name and the ID of the camera, we will perform a new query that is practically the same. It just changes the path, and of course the agent ID and the device ID are in the path we are requesting. It is quite long because the API is pretty much rich. So you can see that the request is agent ID, device ID, multimedia camera snapshot. And we are not going to just parse the response as a JSON structure, but we are fetching the extension we are going to use from the header by performing some weird string formatting, but it's because we have to split some parts. And then we are going to decide that the file name is just the name of the camera dot the extension of the image. And then we are going to write the image as a file in the current working directory and just print a message that the snapshot has been taken. So it takes a lot because it's actually doing the snapshot is going a full round trip to the camera and back, passing through the Domotz cloud. So it's not very fast, but it's so we can see that there are some JPEG images in my directory. That are actually live images from JB's house. Okay, now I'm going to show you that there has been an error in this snapshot because the Playroom camera, it's an expected error. The Playroom camera didn't return a JPEG image, but a strange file name that is .json semicolon characters and so on. This is because, as I said before, I don't handle errors in this small program, but the API is fairly robust to errors. So instead of breaking out, it returns a meaningful message that says, unable to retrieve camera snapshot. The reason is unknown. Actually, we sabotaged the camera itself in order to create the most weak error possible. And anyway, when you write programs, you have to foresee that something can go wrong and to be able to intercept these errors. And the API gives you the means for doing that because it's not shown in the code. But in case of error, you can see that something went wrong by the HTTP status code that is not 200, but is 500 something, depending on the kind of error. So this is a very simple program. For a more meaningful example, for showing you something that can be a more interesting use case, we made another program. It's available in the same Git repository, but we are not going to show you the code because it's quite complex, the code, and it cannot be skimmed out in a few minutes. But you can study and you can look at it because it's all, I hope, documented and understandable. The program has a little bit better command line interface, and as a final result, you can create a full HTML page with all these snapshots of a site, all the snapshots of an agent. It's still a prototype, but you can use as a baseline for a more complex scenario, matching your needs. And the tool is called it has quite a lot of possible subcommands, and all of them, all of the cases we show, plus something more. So I'm going to compose a new page starting from the same agent we saw. It's reporting the error on the Playroom camera that is broken, but you will see that the error is managed a little bit better on this case because more code and better error handling. So you can see a composite of all the images as thumbnails, and I added some details. You can choose an image, and you have a more informative image that something went wrong in the Playroom camera, that the camera doesn't work. If the camera was locked because of a password, you would have seen a small lock instead of the cross. And you can go directly to the Domotz web app by clicking on the links. Actually, it's quite easy to write a program that does this. It's not fancy, so you don't need senior programmers or a big team. And you can go directly to the web app where you can see more details and you can access all the features. Okay, I'm done. I think that I can go back. The presentation powers to Giancarlo. Is it fine?
Yes, Jacopo, I really appreciate the detail that you went into there. And I know you gave a lot of really good examples and walked through the code live. And, you know, I was glad to see that everything worked out like it should. You never know what you're going to get with live demos, but this worked out well. So great job. I do want to make a note to everybody. I said this at the beginning, but I definitely want to reiterate this. All of the presentation materials that Giancarlo and Jacopo showed will be made available with a recording of this webinar, and some of the examples, the example code, you'll be able to leverage or copy and paste as well. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. We did get a couple of questions here through the channel. I do want to invite those of you that are on the webinar that if you wanted to see more details about something, or if you had a question on something that you didn't see, by all means reach out to that questions channel, and we'll be happy to address those over the next 10 to 15 minutes or until we end this webinar. And the other thing that I want to say is we do want your feedback. We definitely want to hear from you. At the end of the survey, when we send out a notification for the recording and where you can find the materials that we're presenting, we will also provide a survey. This is one of the the first technical series that we've done in quite a while, and we're excited to do more of these, but we want to hear from you on what are the types of technical information that you guys would like to see. We decided to present on our APIs, and in particular, we focused on ONVIF cameras and showing how you can grab snapshots, because we've seen a lot of feedback from managed service providers that they want to be able to expand their business by monitoring security cameras and other systems within the network. And we felt that reporting on security cameras and showing you how you can grab snapshots and pull those into your own customized reports would be useful for you. So that's why we started with this. And I think I applaud Giancarlo and Jacopo for putting this together. So thank you guys for doing that. With that being said, let's get into a few questions that I see here. Giancarlo, one of the things that was brought up in our questions that I think you addressed, but for those that maybe joined a little bit later, I want to address it again. Where is it that our customers can, or if you have a Domotz account, where you can find information about the APIs? Are you? You're not
okay?
muted,
Yeah, I was on mute. Thanks. Thanks for that question, GB. Yeah. So basically, the entry point for the for getting familiarized with the Domotz Public API is from the portal.domotz.com. Under the settings, there is a section called API key, and this is where user can retry or create a new API key and get. So I will show that. Create a new API key, test2, get the exact API key and the endpoint which will be used for using that API key. Let me remove again. Let's make sure. From the same page, users also have access to the reference or the documentation of the public API. And this gives access to the public API documentation and the Domotz webhook documentation. Worth to mention, the API key can be generated only by the team master, the owner of the master account.
That's a really good point, Giancarlo. The team master, when they have that API, essentially gives all of the permission levels associated with that team master and that API key, correct?
Sorry, say that again, JP?
So when the team master generates that API key and all the permissions are associated with that team master level, correct?
That's a correct statement. Yeah. That's a correct statement.
Good. Good. It's important for developers, and most developers should know this, but the things I've come to learn is that if that API key is exposed to people who shouldn't have those permission levels, then you should probably revoke that key and create a new one. Right?
Yeah, that's a very correct statement, JP. I completely agree with that. So that's why even in the portal, once the API key is created, I don't have access to that one anymore. So you need to copy, store in safe place, and never show to somebody that you do not trust, absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, Giancarlo, we just got a question, which I think is really relevant since we're talking about API keys. The question is, how secure are the API keys, and can they be sniffed and used by unauthorized users? Can you speak to the security of API keys and how they should be managed?
Absolutely. I can tell you how they are used or how they are stored in our system. They are stored in our system in an encrypted way. So even at the rest point, they are not available clearly. On the transmission of the API key, all the transmission of the data in Domotz is on top of a TLS protocol. So they are not transmitted in clear anyway. So both from when I receive a new API key or when I want to perform an API call to Domotz Cloud. The API key that you send from your client is transmitted to in an encrypted way over HTTPS in that case.
Yeah, good. This was actually another question that came up that we didn't get a chance to answer during the presentation, but I'd like to bring it up now, and it's probably for Jacopo. The question was, can we provide some sample code that does include proper error handling within the APIs? A lot of the point that was made by Garrett here was that a lot of code that's out on the web really doesn't show how to handle errors. Jacopo or Giancarlo, whoever wants to answer this, what's your thoughts on that? Is that something that we can provide pretty easily within our examples?
I can take it. The tool I showed in the last example, the Domotz Camera tools, actually it goes quite a long way to intercept error and properly handling them. It's complex to handle errors, so I didn't show in this quick tutorial, but on the code that is shared on GitHub, there's I suppose plenty of error handling and even error retrieving. So if I remember correctly, there is some code that tries again if an error appears that can be retried, or just give up if the errors is one of those that doesn't allow for retrying. So yes, but it's quite complex in general as a part of our job to correctly handle errors. So I think that the code of the camera snapshot tool, of the Domotz camera tools, does it. So you can see.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's
it's open source, so you don't need permission to access it.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacopo. I appreciate that answer. And so we'll make sure that that's posted there. One of the questions we got regarding the APIs, and I think that it's a good question here. Actually there were two of them. Let me get to the first one, and Giancarlo, I think this is a good question for you. When an API call is made to the system, let's say pulling an image from an ONVIF camera, is that information reported and logged in the Domotz logging and reporting UI?
Very, very good question, GP. Yes, they are. So let me show the snapshot in particular, or if you create a tunnel to a specific device, those are, for security purposes, abstracted in the report and logging activity, even if they are created from the Domotz portal, the Domotz API. Let me show you the ones that I created before. It was in the Draper office. So I did, through the means of the API, I did create a couple of snapshots this morning. And this is where, I took the first snapshot early in the morning just to test it, and then the snapshot when we were live in this webinar. In the same way, other activity like creation of tunnel through the API will be reported here. The owner of the event is, of course, the team master, because that's the owner of the API key.
Good points. Good points. Yeah, thank you, Giancarlo, for asking that. You know, another question that we got here, and this is around cameras as well in particular. I think this came up because we focused on this. But the question was, can I update camera device credentials for Domotz in bulk through the API? So that way they don't have to enter information on each individual camera. I assume that this question is coming from the point that if you are putting a Domotz agent onto a commercial site where there may be 20, 30, even 50 cameras, the last thing they want to do is to update each one individually. What's your thoughts on that, Carlo?
So there are a couple of ways you can achieve that. So Speaking about public API, the first one I want to address is using the set credential API. So you, in the same way, we do a cycle around all the security camera available on a site. Within that cycle, you can set the credential for the camera and put it, of course, I'm assuming they use all the same credential of the camera. This is the first way, probably the easier way, since we are thinking about public API. The other way, which is of course easier from a user perspective or UI perspective, is leveraging the global manage functionality. So if you go to the global manage functionality and you search for the camera, which are listed here, and I can refine the filter by selecting only the JB's agent, which was the IoT, and I do search only for those camera. I can select all of them and then set the credential for all of them in one click. I actually, yeah, this is the device management. It's not applicable probably. Oh, sorry for that. This is not my agent, so I cannot change this one. It's shared by JP, so I cannot put that. Let me put this one. I will do with the leaning camera, for instance. When I do this, I can, yeah, in the office, I can basically select these cameras and click on the device management, and I can set credential of that camera here. Those are the two methodology we usually recommend.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Giancarlo. Hey, another really good question came in, and I'm gonna ask this question, but then I'm gonna follow it up with another question that I get a lot of questions about. The question in particular was, is the Domotz APIs, are they synchronous or asynchronous? Jacopo, can you speak to the differences there?
Yeah, okay. If I understand correctly the question, the REST HTTP API is being an HTTP API synchronous in network. That means that the client, for example, Postman or my program, perform a request and wait until the server came back without an answer. And a synchronous model it is the one we use with the webhooks. That means because it means that the client sets up the webhook request, and when something happens on the server, it asynchronously calls back the clients and raises the event. So I hope I answered.
Yeah, no, it's great, and that actually leads into the second part of the question that I wanted to ask. And Giancarlo, I know that you and I have been on some calls with customers that have been trying to build their own dashboards, and the question comes up around, when do I use the RESTful APIs and when do I use webhooks? Yeah, Giancarlo, I think you addressed this, and I think for some of those that are developers or that understand this more, it's probably a rehash, but can you speak to that again on when's the best time to use RESTful APIs and when should you use webhooks?
Okay, so as I was mentioning at the beginning, the RESTful public API is the synchronous way of getting data out of the Domotz cloud. You do a get a request and you get the status of devices or agents, and you can use that to synchronize your databases with Domotz. You can use those public API to create a script to take a snapshot of all the devices on the network and the status of those devices or the history of those devices, when they went online, when they went offline, and so on. On the other hand, if you are trying to build your own dashboard, and your dashboard requires to have a history of events in your own databases, okay, you probably want to subscribe to events that happen with Domotz instead of polling continuously through the Domotz Public API. And this is when you start using the Domotz webhook. It requires for you to have a web server that receive the webhooks from Domotz, analyze the webhooks from Domotz, and react to them. For instance, I was showing you this free web server that receive continuously the webhooks that I'm continuously send, because my devices are going up and down continuously. And so it receives an event like this saying that under the agent, blah, 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 the device ID 6322590 lost the heartbeat. And now my web server can react by doing an API call and get all the details about this device and store in the database. So those are the two approaches. Public API key for synchronous synchronizing databases or synchronous gets, and the webhooks for asynchronous event, subscribing events, basically.
And Giancarlo, I think that's a great way to put that, because in your example here, right, if a device, and Jacopo and you and I have talked about this before, and we've talked about it with other customers, but if a device, let's even say a security camera, if it were to fall offline, right, you should have a webhook that shows that event occurring. And at that point, then you can use the APIs to query the device, ensure that it's still offline, and then you can use the APIs to actually implement something like a power cycle, right? Or doing a PoE command to turn off PoE and then bringing it back.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point, GB. And it will be part of next webinar probably. It will be around that case, use case.
Great. That's awesome. Hey, a question came up that I think I'd like to answer here, and then we're about to run out of time. But one of the questions that came up is, are only IP cameras supported, or will network connected DVRs also have support at some point? I'd like to answer that one. The benefit of what we're showing here is that IP-based security cameras are network connected, and they are streaming video over the network itself through the ONVIF protocols, in particular Profile S. With respect to NVRs as well as DVRs, the problem is that DVRs will usually be recording the video, and they're not necessarily broadcasting or sending out video from each of the cameras. So there's really no way for Domotz to actively grab or request the screen from those cameras directly. Now, what I will say, and some of the things that we have investigated, and this is coming from me as a product manager looking at this space, the thing that we would like to do is work with some of the different NVR and DVR manufacturers and find out how we can create drivers that would allow us to query information from particular channels that they are recording and then extract that information. For instance, if we could grab a current snapshot from one of the channels, we could then show it in our UI. We have the infrastructure to do that. But today, from an API perspective, you cannot do that from an NVR or DVR. And I'd also, and Jacopo pointed this out as well, when you're dealing with some of the, let's call them proprietary or cloud connected cameras, think of them as like the Nest, the Arlo, some of these other cameras from like Ubiquiti, where they stream directly to the cloud. Unfortunately, they don't follow these standard protocols. So we have to create unique drivers. If they have APIs available, then we could create a driver for them, but they don't always do that. So hopefully that addresses that question there that was asked by Randy. Let me ask one final question, and then we'll end here. Giancarlo, we often get the question about, can we create new APIs? You know, you and I have talked with customers before that the public APIs are really quite powerful. There's a lot of them, and fundamentally you can build a very similar dashboard to what Domotz has in our UI using those public APIs. Now, because of the way we got started, we know that our user interface, our web apps, our mobile apps are really based around these APIs plus some other private APIs. But then the question comes up, if a new API is needed for somebody, can we create that? What's possible there? Giancarlo, do you want to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really something relatively easy to implement or to bring. So basically, the code behind the API will be the same as the private API. It's just the interface that we expose, which we want to make sure will be public, and since it's public, should be not changed in the future. So that's the difference basically between the private API and the public API. Private API are used internally by our software, either the web app or the app or the portal itself, and they might be subject to changes because for instance, we introduce new features that need to change that behavior of the private API. The public API need to be stable because you build you MSP or service provider build your own software around those, and you want to make sure that those public API can be used for years since you start using that. But to answer your question shortly, yeah, absolutely. If you need something that is not available in the public API, but it's available in the UI, just shoot an email to our support team and we will handle that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Giancarlo. We are at our 1 hour mark. I really appreciate Jacopo, you being online, especially from Italy. I know it's late your time. Thank you for joining us. Giancarlo, thank you for helping put this together. I think it was you did a great job. We're going to do more of these. As I mentioned before, this has been recorded. We're going to make it available to you once we finish up the details of GoToWebinar. And then we're also going to provide the code snippets to you as well in the link. A survey will be provided. We definitely want your feedback on that. And please tell us what else you'd like to see in these technical webinars. We are more than happy to do these. We think these are good. If we can get on a cadence of doing these once a month, we think it's going to be very beneficial to everybody. Thank you for attending, and I look forward to speaking to you and talking to you on the next webinar. Thank you very much.